I'm Eliza, 32, and I work in analytics in Seattle, which means two things. I'm good with numbers, and I have zero tolerance for bullshit. The story starts this past Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Westport, Connecticut. It's this massive colonial house, sits right on the water, and it's always been the family anchor. My dad, Graham, 68, is a retired auto dealer, and my mom, Vivian, 64, is a shark in high-end real estate. Which is relevant, trust me. I flew in early that morning, and the second I pulled up, my gut started twisting. The house looked too perfect. Fresh beige paint, immaculate trim. It reeked of chemicals, the kind of new paint smell that coats the back of your throat. Underneath that, though, was a scent I couldn't place. Something damp and heavy, like wet soil mixed with something sickly sweet. I dropped my bag in my old room and immediately noticed the baseboards looked suspiciously pristine, almost hastily installed. Why repaint the whole house 2 days before the biggest holiday of the year? It was a major red flag. But before I could explore, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. She had a stack of dense legal documents clipped together, bristling with those little yellow sticky notes where I supposedly needed to sign. "Eliza, sweetie, you're early. Listen, your father wants to make an announcement at dinner, but the lawyer insisted on getting these signed today. It's the house transfer. We're giving it to you, the eldest, just like tradition dictates." She pushed the papers toward me while fussing over the turkey. She didn't look at me. She just kept smiling this tight real estate agent smile that didn't touch her eyes. Validation. That was the first emotion. All my life, I felt like the responsible runner-up while my younger sister, Jade, got the attention and the spoils. Getting the family home, the legacy, felt like a long overdue win. I even uncapped the pen, but the scent of dampness and paint was suddenly overpowering, and my analytic brain clicked on. I squinted at the text under the first sticky note. Too small. "Mom, I left my reading glasses up in the study when I printed my return flight confirmation earlier. I need to check the fine print. You know how careful I am with contracts. I'll be 5 minutes." Before she could protest, and she moved fast, her hand actually reached out to take the documents back, I grabbed the whole stack and was halfway up the stairs. "Just watch the turkey, Mom. I'll be right back." I didn't stop until I was locked in the study. I put on my glasses, and the dense legal text snapped into cold, hard focus. The first sticky note covered the title, Loan Assumption Agreement, not a deed transfer. My fingers went instantly numb. I flipped the page, skipping straight to the key clauses. The assuming party, Eliza Rhodes, agrees to assume full immediate responsibility for the outstanding mortgage debt in the amount of $410,000. $410,000. The Westport Colonial wasn't a gift. It was a $500,000 anchor they were trying to chain to my neck. The realization hit me like a physical blow, sucking the air from my lungs. I sank onto the desk chair, skimming further. There was an attached rider referencing an emergency disbursement of $50,000 for critical structural repairs released 3 weeks ago. 50 grand. Approved to fix whatever was rotting this multi-million-dollar asset. My parents had just tried to con their own daughter into signing for an illegal, debt-ridden, structurally unsound property. I needed evidence, and I needed air. I shoved the papers into my tote bag, crept down the back stairs, and headed straight for the detached boat-side garage. The side door was unlocked. Inside, the usual smell of old tools and salt air, mixed with a very new, very expensive aroma of chrome and fresh leather. Covered by a heavy silver tarp in the center of the garage, where Dad's old sedan usually sat, was something massive. I carefully pulled back the tarp. It was a brand new 40-foot cabin cruiser, a yacht. Gleaming fiberglass, luxurious seating, the kind of floating status symbol that cost more than my entire condo in Seattle. I found the purchase folder in the glove compartment. Bill of sale, $175,000. Date of purchase, 4 days ago. Buyer, Graham Rhodes. They took the $50,000 repair money, added a ton of debt, and bought a yacht, then tried to paint over the rotting foundation and mortgage the whole mess onto me.
My hands were perfectly steady now. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, it had burned off the shock. I walked around the house and slipped into the basement. The dampness was suffocating here, and the fresh paint on the concrete walls was visibly bubbling.
I scraped away a blister with my fingernail. Beneath the beige was a tapestry of black, toxic black mold blooming across the foundation walls. I took photos of the yacht and the mold, time-stamped, using my analytical rigor to gather my receipts. I scrubbed my hands clean and walked back into the dining room just as Dad stood up, tapping his wine glass for attention. He looked down at me, beaming, right before he started the charade. The room hushed as Dad, Graham, stood at the head of the table, his hand resting on my shoulder in what was now a truly chilling gesture of false patronage. Attention, everyone! Evelyn and I have some wonderful news. We are officially passing on the family home to our eldest, Eliza. The applause was deafening, the family all buying into the benevolent patriarch act, with Aunt Linda wiping a tear and my cousin Marcus, who thankfully looked genuinely uncomfortable, clapping awkwardly. Across the table, my sister, Jade, 28F, the aspiring influencer, offered me a sickeningly sweet, triumphant smirk that I now understood perfectly. You get the debt, I get the reward. Dad continued. And since the house is a big responsibility, we wanted to make sure Jade felt recognized too, so balance things out. Mom, Vivian, reached into her bespoke Chanel purse and pulled out a velvet box, sliding it across the mahogany table to Jade, with the flair of a luxury broker closing a deal. Jade gasped and lifted out a blindingly sparkly diamond necklace and matching earrings, which Dad proudly announced was a token of love worth $15,000. Jade stood up, parading the diamonds, and stopped by my chair. Thanks, big sis, she purred, loud enough for everyone to hear. For shouldering the family legacy. I know the house is a huge responsibility, but somebody has to do it, right? Her subtext was raw financial cruelty. She gets the easily liquidated $15,000 diamond asset, I get the $410,000 liability and the rotting foundation. Dad raised his glass again. To Eliza and to tradition. The room was a sea of raised crystal, but my glass remained on the table. My silence was the first crack in their perfect performance. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and opened my photo gallery, holding the screen up and angling it toward the relatives nearest me. The cabin cruiser in the garage is gorgeous, Dad. Does it run on diesel or the $50,000 you fraudulently obtained for structural repairs? The clinking of crystal stopped instantly. I slowly panned the phone around the table, showing the gleaming yacht and the $175,000 bill of sale with his signature. Then I swiped to the next photo, the black mold, bubbling and spreading behind the scraped-away paint in the basement, clearly time-stamped to an hour earlier. And here is where the repair money actually went. You painted over toxic black mold and tried to trick your own daughter into signing a loan assumption for a contaminated property. Aunt Linda gasped and Uncle Steve dropped his fork. Mom's face was pure white fury, but before she could launch into her usual damage control, I unfolded the bank email, holding up the First National Bank letterhead like a prosecutor's exhibit. The bank denied the refinancing because the debt-to-income ratio was too high. You needed a cosigner, a scapegoat to take on the $410,000 debt you created by buying a boat instead of fixing the foundation. Jade tried to interject. Big sis, there must be a misunderstanding, but I cut her off with 3 cold, flat words. Shut your mouth. The diamonds around her neck suddenly looked cheap, a ridiculous distraction. Dad tried to stammer that they were going to help with payments, but the room had turned into a jury. Uncle Steve demanded, Grim, did you dump your debt on Eliza? Aunt Linda shrieked, Vivian, you painted over mold? That's illegal. That's fraud. The dining room dissolved into chaos, shouting, accusations, disbelief, and I stood up amidst the noise, grabbing my jacket. Good luck to the family with the bank and the mold remediation, I stated, looking only at my parents, who were crumbling under the weight of 18 condemning relatives.
I walked out of the house, grabbing my suitcase, the smell of fresh paint and putrefaction following me until the Westport air hit my face, clean and cold. I got in my rental car, started the engine, and drove away from the wreckage, checking my phone only to see the inevitable, perfectly timed text from Jade. "Are you happy? Dad just collapsed. Ambulance is coming. If anything happens to him, you are a murderer."
I drove straight to the nearest highway rest stop and pulled over, ignoring the dozens of buzzing notifications flooding my phone from the family group chat, all hysterical over Dad's supposed collapse. I opened Jade's text again. "Dad just had a heart attack and collapsed. The ambulance is coming. If anything happens to him, you are a murderer." It was the classic, desperate guilt card, played with absolute precision. I took a deep breath, opened a browser on my phone, and searched for the closest major trauma center to the Westport area, St. Vincent's Medical Center. I called the main line, keeping my voice calm and neutral when the operator connected me to the emergency department triage desk. "Hi, I'm calling to check on a patient who should have just been brought in by ambulance. Graham Rhodes, heart attack." The nurse was professional. I could hear her typing in the background. She took a minute, the silence stretching out while my entire body was rigid with anticipation. "Ma'am, I'm showing no patient by the name of Graham Rhodes admitted or treated in our emergency department tonight." I closed my eyes, the cold, hard clarity of that fact extinguishing the last tiny flicker of doubt. They hadn't called an ambulance. They had called a bluff. "Thank you," I said simply. "That's all I needed to know," and hung up. I immediately took a screenshot of my call log, showing the hospital number and the precise time, attached it to a new message, and sent it to the family group chat. "The emergency department at St. Vincent's reports no one named Graham Rhodes was admitted tonight. Did Dad collapse onto the $175,000 yacht, Jade?" I hit send, then swiftly navigated to the group settings, selecting Leave Group, Rhodes Family. The immediate secondary onslaught of individual texts from Mom, Jade, Aunt Linda started vibrating my phone off the dashboard, but I powered down the device completely, sliding it into the glove compartment. The silence was instantaneous, profound, and utterly liberating. They had played their final emotional card, the fake death emergency, and I had destroyed it with one verifiable fact. 3 days later, back at my apartment in Seattle, staring at my clean, mold-free walls and balancing quarterly data, a new message popped up from Marcus, my cousin and the only honest person at the dinner. It was a screenshot of Mom's public Facebook page. The text was a masterpiece of gaslighting. "I'm heartbroken to share that my eldest daughter Eliza is suffering from severe paranoia and delusional episodes due to work stress. She is fabricating stories about black mold, yachts, and debt that simply do not exist. Please pray for her recovery." Below it, Jade had commented, predictably, "She's just jealous because I got the necklace." I felt a cold, professional rage settle over me. They were trying to publicly discredit me to the entire extended family and social circle to protect their credit and reputation. I texted Marcus back. "Ready to drop the receipts?" I sent him 4 files, the bank denial email, the yacht bill of sale with the price and Dad's signature, and 2 high-resolution, time-stamped photos of the black mold bubbling through the paint in the Westport basement. His reply was one word: done. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all saying the same thing. "Eliza, your mother's post is gone. The receipts are everywhere. I saw the mold. I am so sorry." The public shaming had backfired spectacularly, turning their narrative into verifiable fraud. A week later, a ridiculous, highly formal email arrived, titled "Demand for Immediate Payment." It was clearly written by Jade, pretending to be a lawyer, demanding $50,000 for defamation, unauthorized entry into the private garage, and theft of proprietary documents. The sheer desperation made me laugh out loud.
They couldn't afford an attorney, but they were threatening to sue me. I typed a one-line reply, copying my own sharp-witted attorney, Simone. Great. Sue me. I will countersue for attempted mortgage fraud and forward all evidence to the IRS. I hit send and waited. The silence that followed was total. My sharp-witted attorney, Simone, called me back within the hour after I forwarded the ridiculous, badly formatted demand email, a transparent threat clearly drafted by Jade pretending to be a legal professional, her voice laced with professional amusement. Eliza, people who send threats like this are always bluffing and always broke. If they were serious, they wouldn't use a personal email address and demand money for theft of proprietary documents, which, by the way, included their own bank rejection letter.
This is the death rattle of people who have run out of credit, options, and reputation. Simone was right. The silence that followed the email was absolute. No more demands, no more frantic texts, no more emotional manipulation. Mom's delusional public Facebook post about my mental health issues vanished completely, and the comment section, where Marcus, bless him, had deposited the irrefutable evidence, the mold photos and the yacht receipts, was scrubbed clean. The digital evidence was gone from their view, but the seeds of doubt and disgrace had been planted firmly in the entire family network. I went back to my life in Seattle, my data sets and my clean, mold-free walls, diligently paying my own rent and watching my meticulously maintained credit score climb steadily. The satisfaction wasn't a sudden rush of triumphant adrenaline. It was a slow, quiet, deep sense of structural integrity, the kind of rock-solid foundation my parents' debt-ridden, sinking house in Westport never had. I had successfully replaced the toxic, debt-fueled validation I once craved with actual, self-earned stability. 2 months later, I was sipping my morning coffee, reviewing a complex analytical model, when Marcus's name popped up on my phone with a new text. This time, the news was definitive, the final, inevitable domino falling. The bank foreclosed on the Westport house. They had 30 days to vacate. I stared at the text, waiting for a profound emotional response. Guilt, a rush of triumph, a flicker of sadness for the loss of a childhood home, but felt only a tired finality, the only logical conclusion to their reckless, fraudulent decisions. The consequences of their actions were finally, physically manifesting. What about the yacht? I typed back, knowing the answer already. Repossessed last week, along with Jade's leased luxury SUV, Marcus added. Apparently she co-signed something without reading the fine print for Dad. Classic Jade. The golden child, the eternal recipient of the liquid assets, had finally been dragged down by the same calculated fraud that had created her expensive pedestal. They were moving into a cramped rental apartment in a less affluent inland part of the state, he explained. Mom, in a final act of desperation, had tried to lean on her real estate contacts and borrow money from various well-off relatives to stave off the eviction, but the undeniable shame, coupled with the verifiable facts I had introduced at the Thanksgiving table, had effectively frozen everyone's wallets. The carefully constructed facade of Graham and Vivian Rhodes, the successful Westport socialites, had been completely shattered, replaced by the reality of disgraced fraudsters. I didn't inherit a grand colonial house, but I inherited my freedom. I didn't get a gaudy $15,000 diamond necklace, but I retained my 6-figure credit rating and my profound, unshakable peace of mind. I had actively chosen my financial independence, my integrity, and my future over their toxic, debt-ridden legacy, and the result was tangible. I got up from my desk and walked to my kitchen window, looking out over the clear, expansive Seattle skyline. My 700-square-foot apartment was small, but every piece of furniture, every utility bill paid, was unequivocally mine, free from any secret lien or systemic rot. The air smelled only of freshly brewed coffee and clean drywall. 4 months later, my professional hard work, fueled by a renewed focus unburdened by family crises, paid off spectacularly. I opened my laptop one spring morning and saw an email from my supervisor. Congratulations on your promotion to lead analytics manager.
It came with a substantial 20% salary increase, effective immediately, and included a paragraph praising my exceptional analytical rigor and unshakable composure under pressure. The irony was deliciously palpable. I had honed those high-level skills not in a boardroom, but in a mold-infested basement, meticulously documenting the fraudulent crimes of my own parents. I closed the laptop, a decision already made, and opened a new tab. Flights to Iceland. Since I was 16, back when I was constantly diverting my small college paychecks to cover some manufactured family emergency invented by my parents, I dreamed of seeing the Northern Lights. I booked a week-long solo trip to Reykjavik, selecting the window seat without a second's hesitation. No need to ask permission, no need to save for someone else's car payment, no fear of a last-minute cancellation due to a family collapse. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number, but the familiar, unmistakable Westport area code. Eliza, it's Jade. I know you blocked Mom, but please just hear me out. I was wrong. I see that now. They've been blaming me for everything since the foreclosure. Dad says it's my fault you exposed them. Mom won't even speak to me half the time. I'm sorry for what I did. Can we talk just once? The message was a transparent, panicked act of self-interest, but I recognized the genuine pain in her words, not for the betrayal, but for the consequences she was now personally enduring. She hadn't apologized for her participation. She apologized because the house of cards had fallen on her too. Still, a tiny, detached part of me, the analytic need to close the loop, to terminate the contract completely, wanted one final meeting. Fine. One coffee. Next Tuesday. Java House on Maple. 30 minutes. That's it. I wasn't doing it for her absolution. I was doing it for my own sense of irreversible finality, to look her in the eye one last time, deliver the last clear piece of truth if needed, and then walk away forever, knowing I had given her the chance she never once afforded me. Today, though, was reserved for celebration. I grabbed my leather coat and headed out, the elevator humming as it descended. I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors, same thick-rimmed glasses, same intense focus. But my posture was fundamentally different now. Lighter, unburdened. The Seattle cold bit at my cheeks, sharp and bracing, and I walked toward the restaurant district, my hands in my pockets, already thinking of geysers and glaciers, and a life finally, definitively, and irrevocably my own. The family wasn't destroyed by my actions. They were destroyed by the truth I simply held up for everyone to see. And I, Eliza Rhodes, was finally, absolutely free.